The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. Remember when it was alleged that President Richard Nixon had an enemies list, which was largely a fabrication by John Dean, but nonetheless the Democrats and their handmaidens in the mainstream media went completely crazy. Well, now we've learned that the Biden administration had such a hit list, but I suggest to you that the Democrats and their friends in the mainstream media will largely be silent. The weaponization of government against political opponents has now reached an apex so grotesque, so tyrannical, and so nakedly partisan that even the casual observer cannot miss it. You see, the FBI launched Project Arctic Frost in April of 2022, but they dressed it up as an inquiry into the events surrounding the 2020 election. But what it became was a dragnet ensnaring nearly 100 Republican groups and individuals, conservatives, and yes, Trump supporters. It included the Republican National Committee, the Republican Attorney General's Association, Charlie Kirk's organization, Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk himself, Mayor Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and yes, yours truly. Not to mention countless others who suddenly pulled into the vortex of suspicion, not because of evidence of crime or they did anything wrong, but because of our political views. The project was codenamed Arctic Frost. It's not merely an investigation. It's a sledgehammer that was wielded against those hiding the crimes of the Biden crime family and the demonic Democratic regime with their deep state allies to bludgeon conservatives into submission. Make no mistake about it. This is not about justice. It was retribution. It was revenge. It was reprisal. It was retaliation. See, this is how the left operates. They took their playbook straight from Saul Alinsky, the famous communist operative, and they manufacture investigations, stretch the law like taffy, and unleash federal prosecutors as political hitmen. The result is not merely reputational destruction, but financial and personal annihilation. They know that defending oneself against an endless barrage of subpoenas, proffer sessions, civil proceedings, depositions, document requests, and trials bleeds the target dry. You see, even if you ultimately prevail, you're left bankrupted, humiliated, tortured, and, well, exhausted. And I guess that's the point. The left mockingly calls this justice. I and their other victims call exactly what it is, lawfare. This is the same lawfare that was used against me when fabricated charges and perjured testimony were assembled like Lincoln logs, building a case designed to ruin my life. I survived only by the grace of God, the support of patriots across America, and ultimately the justified pardon by President Donald Trump, who knew who I was, and he knew I was innocent the entire time. But make no mistake, millions of dollars in legal bills, years of harassment, and the permanent smear on my name are scars that still remain. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and all the rest, they've all failed to report that Special Counsel Robert Mueller's final unredacted report, which was only released because of the order of a federal judge, grudgingly admitted that Mueller had found no evidence of Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other crime on my part. In fact, Mueller admitted that the barriers to prosecuting me for any such crimes were, quote, factual, unquote. Arctic Frost is just the newest and most sinister extension of this political persecution. Its very name is telling. A frost, meant to chill, to freeze, to intimidate any American who dares question the regime, organize politically, or exercise their free speech rights. They don't need to win convictions. They just need to destroy your life. They just need to send a message. Cross us, and we will bankrupt you. We will destroy you. It's lawfare. This is not democracy. It's tyrannical government festooned in business suits. The Biden Justice Department, propped up by Comey loyalists still infesting the FBI today, and their useful idiots in the media, are running an operation more suited to East Germany's Stasi than the United States. This and all their lawfare offenses will fail. The American people are waking up, finally. For unfortunately, the brutal political assassination of Charlie Kirk has only sped up this process. They're beginning to see the double standard, the selective prosecution, the fabricated charges. The American people now see that while Hunter Biden commits firearms-related crimes, sells access to the Oval Office like they were candy bars, and receives a preemptive pardon, the Republicans are dragged through the fires of hell for paperwork errors or political free speech. They see the scales of justice tip like a carnival game. Therefore, I must wonder, why would Hunter Biden need a preemptive pardon? Ask yourself the same. If the Biden crime family was never involved in anything deleterious, then why the need for a pardon at all for each and every one of them, and preemptively at that? So just as we survived the lies of the Russian collusion hoax, we will also survive Operation Arctic Frost. We will expose it for what it is, a political vendetta masquerading as an investigation. When the reckoning comes, and it will, history books will show that this era of weaponized lawfare was the death rattle of a corrupt establishment that feared the people more than it loved the truth. Thank you for joining us today in the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. The scandal of Charles McGonigal is something that is of great interest to me because, you see, it's no mere footnote in history. It is still a festering, malignant sore on the face of American justice. Charles McGonigal is no mere footnote in history. It is the most brazen example of the FBI's arrogance, corruption, and crimes against the American people. You see, McGonigal was a high-level FBI official who was charged with accepting bribes when he should have been charged with both espionage and treason. And make no mistake about it, this sordid tale of betrayal and deception is very, very far from over. You see, Charles McGonigal was once the exalted head or crowned head of the counterintelligence kingdom at the FBI's all-powerful New York field office. But he wasn't simply dabbling with Russia and Albania. The officer of the Inspector General of the FBI has now confirmed that many of us have always long suspected. His tentacles extended into China, as well as none other than the not-so-casual association with the Biden crime family. China, the very adversary waging an unrelenting war on America's economy, our health, our sovereignty, and our future, he was in bed with them. Where else did McGonigal's treachery reach? Who else within the upper echelons of American law enforcement and intelligence service was in league with him, profiteering on America's vulnerabilities, feeding at the trough of betrayal like barnyard pigs? And yet, what punishment did this so-called rogue FBI operative receive for his colossal catalog of sins? A laughable 78 months in federal prison. 78 months. For a man who consorted with foreign agents, betrayed this nation, compromised national security, and spat in the face of the very sacred oath he swore to uphold. In fact, McGonigal's sentence has been now officially shortened twice. No espionage charges, no treason charges, no asset forfeiture, no tax fraud charges, no further investigative work to uncover McGonigal's involvement in any other illicit financial activities. None. That alone is extraordinary. In virtually every corruption and foreign agent case, the government seizes all ill-gotten gains. But here, McGonigal's prosecution was tidied up with the help of the Biden Justice Department and swept away with surgical neatness as though to erase the evidence trail. And where is the U.S. Treasury Department? Why no action from the Office of Foreign Assets Control to enforce economic sanctions? Why no action from the Financial Crimes Enhancement Network, or FinCEN? Why no sanctions into this matter from the IRS's criminal division into the crimes against our nation, which Charles McGonigal brazenly conspired to violate? Violating United States economic sanctions is not some small technical infraction. It is a crime of the highest order. It undermines the very foundation of American foreign policy and national security. Yet there have been no meaningful investigations into tax fraud, no forensic accounting of his offshore dealings, no scrutiny of money laundering through crypto or shell corporations. Instead, what we have is silence. Silence from the media and silence from the government. Why? Well, because the Biden Justice Department desperately wanted you to believe that Charles McGonigal was just one rotten apple, one bad man, one isolated disgrace. Nothing systemic, nothing to see here. In truth, McGonigal was the senior counterintelligence czar, a member of the carnivorous cabal created by FBI Director James Comey. McGonigal in his day was a major Washington and New York power broker. He was the gatekeeper to America's most sensitive secrets. McGonigal could not possibly have acted alone. He was part of a network. He was a select one of a few in the Comey group, the same shadowy clique of corrupt officials and deep state assassins who concocted the phony Russian collusion hoax, the largest single dirty trick in American political history. That was a witch hunt that ensnared me personally, leading to my false arrest and politically motivated conviction. McGonigal was arrested quietly and with little fanfare, with no more than 11 people at the top tier of the New York City law enforcement and Justice Department officials in the know. By contrast, my false arrest was for much less serious allegations that were proven to be untrue by the full and unredacted Mueller report. It was brought to you on live TV by the FBI and their sponsors, CNN. 29 heavily armed FBI agents in full SWAT gear and brandishing fully automatic M4 assault weapons stormed my home at 6 o'clock in the morning to arrest me for the alleged crime of lying under oath to Congress regarding Russian collusion that we now know definitively never actually happened. McGonigal, on the other hand, was allowed to quietly surrender. This incurious media dutifully played its part with McGonigal's scandal, treating this as a 2 or 3 day story and moving right along. No inquisitiveness, no digging, no appetite to pull the loose thread that would unravel the tapestry of corruption deep inside the FBI and the DOJ. Instead, the media served as a propaganda arm for the Biden administration, repeating the lie that McGonigal was an outlier, not the norm. The scandal came and went in a flash. They chose silence because exposing McGonigal would fully expose them too. I can tell you there's no doubt in my mind, nor the minds of many others, that Charles McGonigal's crimes against our country were a solo operation with only one participant in the Bureau. That is an absurdity. You're listening to The Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone, and we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back. You are re-entering The Stone Zone. President Donald Trump announced in a Truth Social post that he's initiating a $15 billion defamation lawsuit against the New York Times, calling it one of the worst and most degenerate newspapers in the history of our country. In the post, President Trump said, "I view it as the single largest illegal campaign contribution ever." Their endorsement of Kamala Harris was actually put dead center on the front page of the New York Times, something heretofore unheard of. The Times has engaged in a decades-long method of lying about your favorite president, that would be Donald Trump, his family, his business, the America First movement, MAGA, and our nation as a whole. President Trump also cited recent lawsuits against ABC News and CBS News, which is forcing their parent companies to capitulate and change their policies. It's clear that the fake news is scared of President Trump, and they should be. They were caught lying and manipulating elections, and it's time to pay the piper. Hopefully, President Trump's lawsuit causes the New York Times to go out of business. Humanity, in my opinion, would be much better off for it. Meanwhile, the Georgia Supreme Court has declined to review a ruling from a lower court that finally banned Fulton County Attorney Fani Willis from participating in a prosecution of President Trump and his 8 co-defendants. Willis was booted from the case after it was shown that she had an illicit affair with Nathan Wade, who was a personal injury attorney who she then made a special prosecutor. She hired him in the Trump case. Willis whined about the Georgia Supreme Court decision afterwards, saying, "No Georgia court has ever disqualified a district attorney for mere appearance of impropriety without the existence of an actual conflict of interest. And no Georgia court has ever reversed a trial court's order declining to disqualify a prosecutor based solely on an appearance of impropriety." This low IQ DEI diversity hire is truly delusional. This is the first time in Fani's entitled life that where there's been anything handed to her, it was not because of merit, but because of the color of her skin that she's been held accountable. This is privilege that you and I could never dream of possessing, by the way. But with Willis out of the picture, the frivolous case can finally be dismissed, similar to the cases of the pro-Trump electors in Michigan, which was dismissed in court last week. It's time to end all of these lawfare charges that were clearly designed to intimidate President Trump and his supporters and interfere with the election results. Meanwhile, an ABC News reporter said that he found the murderer Tyler Robinson, the man accused of killing Charlie Kirk's, alleged notes with his transgendered lover to be touching following their release by federal authorities. ABC's Matt Gutman said that Robinson's text messages were very touching in a way, and I think that many of us did not expect that. A very intimate portrait into their relationship between the suspect's roommate and himself, with him reportedly calling his roommate, who was transitioning, "my love." You can't make this stuff up. "I want to protect you, my love," Gutman said to the alleged murderer. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone right here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Don't go away, because we'll be right back with more hot political news.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
President Donald Trump has come out and said that he supports Antifa being formally classified as a terrorist organization. President Trump told reporters he would classify Antifa as a terrorist group 100% if he had the support from people like his Attorney General Pam Bondi. President Trump also said there are some other groups who are pretty radical and that they got away with murder. One of those groups President Trump's referring to may be the armed queers of Salt Lake City, who are now reportedly under investigation over alleged ties to the brutal political assassination of my friend Charlie Kirk. President Trump has also said that his administration is looking at hitting the Soros network with RICO charges. That would be George Soros, the Hungarian billionaire, and his son Alex. This would be a great start, but it must encompass much more than just the Soros network. There are thousands of subversive groups that make up the backbone of this leftist network. They control the National Democrat Party. They have listened and understand that the core of the Democrat Party is supporters of violence and terrorism against Christians. All of these subversive left-wing groups must be rooted out, and most importantly, their financial support from our tax dollars must be ended, because it is absolutely clear that USAID has been funding these political activities against the American people. That's right. Your tax dollars and mine are funding this propaganda war against President Donald Trump and anyone who agrees with him. President Trump must do to his enemies what the President Biden and his folks tried to do to his supporters. He has the mandate. Let them rue the day they decided to expand and abuse federal power. The time has come, in my opinion, for a great reckoning. Meanwhile, George Zinn, the 71-year-old provocateur who sprung into action and falsely claimed he shot Charlie Kirk last week, has now been hit with charges relating to child abuse. He's also charged with endangering justice and with possession of child pornography. Zinn ended up at the scene of the assassination of Charlie Kirk last week, where, after the shooting, he immediately caused a diversion that allowed the shooter to get away. Zinn claims that he had foreknowledge of what was going to take place, and he did it instinctively because he wanted the killer to make a clean getaway, and because he felt that Kirk deserved to be brutally murdered. That's a likely story. As we know, the feds have regularly used pedophiles and child abusers as their assets. Think about, for example, Jeffrey Epstein, because they're easy to control. So perhaps Mr. Zinn falls into that category. If his charges of holding child abuse content, in other words, kiddie porn, on his cell phone disappear, or if he's slapped on the wrist, this will be a dead giveaway that Zinn was the Ray Epps of the Charlie Kirk assassination. Meanwhile, Attorney General Pam Bondi has declared a war on hate speech. Following the assassination of Charlie Kirk, Attorney General Pam Bondi is going to war against hate speech, telling anyone, regardless of where they are on the political spectrum, that they will be targeted if they say things the government deems hateful. Now, I personally find this to be a slippery slope because, well, I'm a free speech absolutist. In fact, I believe the First Amendment particularly protects speech which is repugnant, that is disgraceful, that is disgusting. That's not the same thing as shouting fire in a crowded theater. Clearly, when people are making threats of violence, I think that goes beyond the bounds of free speech. But straight opinion, no matter how disgusting you or I may find it, must be legal, must be protected. I don't necessarily agree with the Attorney General when he says there's free speech and then there's hate speech, and there's no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie in our society. She says that they will target and go after you if you are targeting anyone with hate speech. Once again, this is well-intentioned, but it is a very fine line. What she says flies in the face of what defenders of the Constitution support, including what Charlie himself said. In an ex-post last year, Charlie said, hate speech does not legally exist in America. There's ugly speech, there's gross speech, there's evil speech, but all of it is protected by the First Amendment. We must keep America free. Attorney General Bondi would be wise to listen to Charlie Kirk's wise words, drop this hate speech crackdown, and focus on using powers given to the federal government for the war on terror and target and eliminate radical leftist terrorists like Antifa and Black Lives Matter, who financed the assault on the American people in 2020, destroying millions of dollars of both public and private property, injuring thousands and killing hundreds. That's a better use of federal power. When the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, joined Vice President J.D. Vance hosting Charlie Kirk's show days ago, they rightfully said that they would target these terrorist networks that are financing violence and mayhem and, yes, death against the American people. To me, that is the correct response of government. So a judge dropped terrorism charges against alleged murderer Luigi Mangione, resulting in cheers of glee from female Democrats who have become infatuated with the man accused of gunning down a healthcare CEO in cold blood in the streets of New York City only last year. Despite Mangione's screeds about politics and his hatred of the healthcare system, and authorities claiming that Mangione wrote delay, deny, and depose, a reference to unethical practices used by insurers to deny healthcare to individuals on the bullet casings used in the murder, it was determined by a federal judge that there was no political motive behind the killings of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. So now Mangione will face only second-degree murder charges. Mangione's gaggle of Democrat admirers could not be happier. Anywhere you go today on social media, there are countless liberal women who express their desire to get with Mangione. Those women will never have children, find the patriarchy oppressive, find Christianity abhorrent, but they will happily hook up with a violent terrorist killer. You can't make this stuff up. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump says he believes that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is going to have to make a deal for the war with Russia to end. President Trump has bemoaned the fact that Zelensky and President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, hate each other, and it looks like I have to sit in the room with them because they can't sit in a room together alone. President Trump is clearly sick of hand-holding everyone through this entire peace process, and he wants the war to end. In order to bring Putin to the table, President Trump is pressuring countries in the European Union to stop buying Russian oil. He's threatened to provide a massive tariff on Russia if the nations in the EU will join them. Thus far, the EU has been unwilling to act. You see, they want the war to continue. At the same time, they want to buy oil from Russia. Everyone hopes that America will fit the bill for the globalist project in Ukraine. We're not going to foot the bill any further. President Trump is showing them otherwise. He might have to cut Ukraine off completely, which would mean no more money for the play actor Zelensky from U.S. aid and weapons in order for this conflict to end. Zelensky better make a deal fast before President Trump's generosity and his patience wear completely thin. Meanwhile, we learned that FBI Director Kash Patel and Senator Chuck Grassley exposed the secret FBI program that targeted conservative groups like Turning Point USA. This was revealed during a Senate Judiciary Committee meeting on Tuesday. Senator Grassley brought up whistleblower testimony that exposed former FBI agents Timmy Thibault's launch of Arctic Frost, which was used by FBI Special Counsel Jack Smith to target pro-Trump electors who refused to rubber stamp election fraud in the 2020 election. As I said earlier, Senator Grassley said that in total, 92 Republican targets, including Republican groups and Republican-linked individuals, were placed under investigation under the investigation Arctic Frost. Arctic Frost wasn't just a case to politically investigate Trump. It was the vehicle by which partisan FBI agents and Department of Justice prosecutors could achieve their partisan ends and improperly investigate and destroy the entire Republican political apparatus. One of the groups targeted by Arctic Frost was exposed to be Turning Point USA. Similar to Martin Luther King Jr., Charlie Kirk was apparently under surveillance by federal authorities for years before he was assassinated. All of those responsible for Arctic Frost deserve the same fate as the co-conspirators behind the Russiagate frame job, a lifetime behind bars. From time to time, I talk about matters of style here on the Stone Zone, particularly men's style. Well, every well-dressed gentleman must have an all-cotton Oxford cloth button-down shirt. This is a shirt that was originally offered by Brooks Brothers, but today I think J. Press offers the best version. Kamakura, a Japanese purveyor, also has a superior version, but their customer service is not all that dependable. The shirt's button-down collar was originally called a polo collar, as the button-down feature was designed so that the collar would remain in place instead of flapping up in your face during a vigorous game of polo. This classic, an import originally from England, was actually first sighted in 1897 on the polo fields of Long Island, New York. F. Scott Fitzgerald, Bobby Kennedy Sr., George H.W. Bush, and Andy Warhol, the artist, all sported the style on occasion. Fiat industrialist and notorious playboy Gianni Agnelli famously wore his wristwatch on the outside of the right cuff of his. You see, the roll of the collar is crucial. Lower budget makers never get the collar roll or the length of the collar points exactly right. J. Press, more recently, has mastered this. Eschewing the permanent press non-iron model is crucial. The longer you own this all-cotton shirt, the more times you wash it, the softer and more comfortable it will become. Considered an informal dress shirt, it's acceptable with a blazer, a sports jacket, or a single-breasted suit, usually paired with a regimental striped tie, a knit tie, or a saucy-looking bow tie. Never wear a button-down collar shirt with a double-breasted suit, by the way. The more formal double-breasted suit looks best with a more formal spread or long point collar. Now, the famous dancer, actor, movie star Fred Astaire broke this rule, but then you're not Fred Astaire. An Oxford cloth button-down shirt with an unfastened collar, rolled-up sleeves and jeans makes for a comfortable, casual look. The shirt traditionally comes in white, light blue, pink, blue and white stripes, and pink and white stripes. It also comes in yellow, but yellow is a tricky color for most men, depending on their complexion and their coloring. Yellow looks good with a brown suit, but then a brown suit never actually looks good. Speaking of the white button-down Oxford cloth shirt, there's one other thing a true gentleman cannot live without, and that is the black silk knotted square-bottom tie. It's literally indispensable. No true gentleman would be without one. They can be twisted, pulled, knotted, and will perform for decades, if not forever. Such a tie has saved my life on numerous occasions. For example, you're wearing jeans and a blazer. It's Friday, but you're called into a meeting with the boss. Voila! The black knit dress tie dresses up your outfit, moving you from Friday slob to the Euro look. By the way, you can't pull this off if you're stupid enough to be wearing a t-shirt in the office. Or you're dashing across the airport to catch that last flight from LaGuardia to Miami. The latch on your suitcase breaks open, threatening to pull your finery and your toiletries all over the ground. You whip off your indestructible black knit tie, latch the case closed, and you make your flight. Or you're driving your Alfa Romeo Spider or other similar cool sports car through the Swiss Alps when you run out of petrol. A passerby in a Citroen van offers you a tow, but lacks a line. Off comes the tie, which you lash bumper to bumper. Problem solved. Or you're in an Italian joint in the Bronx. A Guido makes a slur against your mother. You come up behind him, slip off your black knit tie, and you garrote him, Luca Brasi style. In the rough and tumble world of politics, media, and life, the black silk knitted tie is indeed indispensable.
The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Stone Zone on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. New York State Attorney General Letitia James, long claiming to be a public champion of tenants' rights, has herself been in violation of New York City's rent stabilization laws for more than 2 decades. Since purchasing a 4-story apartment building at 296 Lafayette Avenue in Brooklyn in 2001, by the way, that's a matter of public record, James has failed to register the property with the New York State Division of Housing and Community Renewal as required for rent-stabilized buildings. By failing to register, she denied her tenants the protections of rent stabilization while collecting rents above the legally regulated amount for 24 years. New York's housing code is based on its rent stabilization law of 1969, was designed to shield tenants from large rent increases, unlawful deregulation, and eviction notices. It sets yearly allowable rent increases, typically at around 3% a year. The law applies to qualifying buildings and requires landlords to register with the NHCR, and file annual reports on tenants, rents, and lease terms. The New York Department of Buildings, or the DOB, issues certificates of occupancy to establish the legal number of units in properties. That designation is the one and only controlling legal authority for unit count. The three most recent certificate of occupancy for the property owned by Letitia James are authorized as a 7-family unit with the building originally designated as a Class A multiple dwelling. That was in 1961. 1981, 2 decades later, the legal unit count was reduced to 4 apartments, reflecting an unauthorized combining of units. And then in 2001, the certificate of occupancy is updated. The building now reflects a 5-family dwelling, which remains its designation today. The Rent Stabilization Act of 1969 said that any building constructed before January 1st, 1974, with 6 or more apartments is subject to rent stabilization laws. The critical point for Letitia James is that according to the 1961 Certificate of Occupancy, the last one before the passage of the rent stabilization law in 69, her building in the Bronx had 7 units. This means that when the law took effect in 1969, James' building was permanently entered into rent stabilization. Once a building is subject to rent stabilization, that status runs with the building forever. Later reductions down to 4 units or back up to 5 units can never be legally used to strip the building of its original rent stabilization regulatory status. Letitia James continues to say that no one is above the law, but evidently that's not true, because when it comes to the rent stabilization laws of New York City, Letitia James continues to be above the law. When will she be brought to justice? Thanks for tuning in today on the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?